My daughter's Everly Ayers. And the one thing that I most remember from Everly is her silhouette.
Welcome to Still a Part of Us, a place where moms and dads share the story of their child who was stillborn or who died in infancy. I'm Winter.
And I'm Lee. We are grateful you joined us today. Please note that this is a story of loss and has triggers.
Thanks to our lost parents who are willing to be vulnerable and share their children with us.
If you're listening to this podcast, just know that on our YouTube channel there are pictures and videos that are related to the stories that are being shared.
Subscribe and share it with a friend that might need it and tell them to subscribe. Why? Because people need to know that even though our babies are no longer with us, they're still a part of us.
That is actually very beautiful. Now, when you say her silhouette, does it remind you of your wife's silhouette, or is it more a combination of both of yours?
Yeah, it's an interesting memory that I have of Everly, and really where it comes from is the first night after she was born, and laying in the hospital room, unable to sleep, and for 7 or 8 hours while it was dark out, all I could do was stare at Everly, and it was a side profile of her face, and that silhouette just is burned into my memory. And
Yeah.
it's the same silhouette that we saw in the first image of her. And that silhouette reminds me so much every time I see Katie's face and that side profile of my wife, Katie. It just sinks right back to that moment that I stared at her for those 6 or 7 or 8 hours, however long it was on that first night that we had to spend with her.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Now, Seth, as we're starting this episode, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about you, your wife, Katie, where you guys about live, and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, born and raised, both my wife here in this area, beautiful area. I'm an HR professional for a large pharmaceutical company. My wife is the complete opposite of an HR professional. She's an analytical scientist with a chemical company. So we have that analytical and the personal side that we counter each other on and balance each other, though. Proud father of Everly Ayers, our only daughter, who unfortunately and very sadly was born still.
You said that Everly is your only daughter. How long had you and Katie been together? Are you guys married, or are you guys a partnership? And how far into this relationship did you guys have her?
Yeah. So Katie and I have met some time ago. We had met over 10 years ago, and we had a long courtship, I guess you could say, for about 3 years. And so we've been married for just over 7 years now. Over those 7 years, we had a lot of experiences and had a lot of plans, and was very intentional in our planning for our family. And so we were both in alignment and agreement. And it's been 11 months and 27 days since Everly's birth and passing on the same day. And been a very difficult 11 months and 27 days. And this is a very timely conversation, Lee, as we are approaching her 1 year birthday.
Yeah, yeah. So many emotions are going to be flooding you and your wife. I'm so excited to talk to you about your daughter, but I'm also sort of reliving the own emotions of the 1 year anniversary of when my son passed away. So, yeah.
And with that, Lee, it's I know that this discussions will bring some really intimate emotions from my side, but I have to applaud and appreciate you for being so vulnerable and open as a lost parent, and listening to your podcasts have just given me such good inspiration, encouragement, openness, and understanding there's some others out there, sadly, that can relate and understand what we've both been through, my wife and I. But I think from a lost father side as well. So I just
Beautiful.
really thank you and appreciate you too for inviting me here and for us being able to set up some time for this conversation today.
Well, thank you. Thanks. As a father, and as you as a father, I'm sure you're understanding. We are sort of specters in the back. A lot of people don't know how to talk to us about our children and our experience. So I'm grateful that I could sort of help you. I guess we could help you. So
Yeah,
yeah.
no, thank you. And you're right. I think it is making sure our wives are first and foremost always, and
Hmm.
I'm sure we can relate and dive into that a little bit too.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a tough role. I think no matter how you play it.
Well, thank you. Question: you said
Yeah.
that you and your wife Katie had been married for about 7 years. Did you guys plan on having a child? Yeah, that's very intimate. I know. There's sometimes it's a mistake, a happy mistake. Sometimes it's a long, hard process to get pregnant. Tell us about how you guys were doing.
Yeah, Lee, I think it's a great question to start because I think it folds into this story
Hmm.
and certainly how this has shaped me since. But so as I mentioned, we had a long time, Katie
Yep.
and I, 10 years together, 7 years married, and we were really pragmatic in how we wanted to approach having a family. We both were able to have and continue to have successful professional careers. We wanted to have that kind of box checked. We wanted to be able to have financial security, home buying, have the travel experiences, as single couple could.
Hmm.
Um, and we got to do those, right? And then we reached a point in time. A lot of our close friends were having children. We were starting to get a bit older into that kind of period of time. And as a man, to be quite honest with you, Lee, age had really very little to do with it in my
Yeah.
mind until
Yeah.
Katie really started to kind of tug at my shirt to say, "Hey, we're both getting to
We're
that age, and we really
you're
need
no
to
longer spring
think about
chickens.
this."
Yeah.
At a point in time, we really then were thoughtful planning periods of when's the highest success rates and
Hmm.
when should we go about this in a thoughtful way, making sure we're healthy and going through the checks and then going through the planning period. So getting pregnant, Katie, actually was quite quick after we started to plan. Certainly didn't happen right away, but
Hmm.
relatively quick. I think in the if you look at it scientifically, it was unbelievable and incredible that day, that morning that Katie shared with me that she tested positive to be pregnant. And it was just a morning I'll remember, a weekend morning, and boy, what a feeling.
Oh man,
Um,
it's a beautiful feeling. It is.
and it was a feeling of excitement, but of course some nervousness. Of course, I'll share, but
Yeah.
yeah, just a vivid memory that I'll never forget.
Now, is this going to be about early spring
It
or
would have been, yeah.
yeah? So a whole new outlook on spring. It's just beautiful weather, starting to be beautiful weather, and this wonderful news and
Yep.
rocks your world, doesn't it? All of a
It really
sudden,
does. And
oh yeah,
it was to your point, yeah. I mean, the air smelled better, the sun felt warmer, and of course, those first few weeks and months, hesitant to share. I was just
yeah,
so eager to tell my parents, to tell family and friends, and of course, Katie being very cautious, wanting to just go through up until a point in time, and it was so specially. We invited my parents and Katie's parents over on Mother's Day.
uh,
We had an opportunity to then share with a little bit of a gift and never forget the moment. My mom and Katie's mom, we had them open up and they could see the image. And at first, I think my mom was confused, thinking, "What kind of gift is this? Why would you send us, share the what is this?" Couldn't really
yeah,
make it out. And then it dawned on her, and we have a video of just both her and my mom just jumping up in joy and just such elation. And it was just a moment that so happy, just so happy.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that's, to share that with both of your parents. I guess we've been beating this drum for a long time during COVID, the latter parts of the COVID, but that's got to be so wonderful. It's just so special. So,
It really
yeah.
was. And to your point of at the height of COVID, things were uncertain and
Yeah.
already starting to take those precautions. So it was minimal interaction with family and friends. And it
Hmm.
was an opportunity for us that was rare at that point in time
Yeah.
to get together. And yeah, it'll be a morning and a Mother's Day I'll never forget.
I'm sure breakfast was really
Oh,
good that day.
everything tasted incredible.
Now let's talk about the rest of the pregnancy. I know during COVID there was some people who weren't able to go into the office for the appointment. Seth, were you able to be at some of the appointments?
I was absolutely. So I was at every single check-in and doctor's appointment that Katie had,
Yeah.
and it was everything was just so easy and went
Hmm.
so well. It was getting to go and meet her doctors, and every appointment, everything was on track and on schedule. It almost became a ritual, right? That
Yeah.
we would go and be able to have kind of anticipating, expecting that great checkup. It's going to be kind of Katie would always set it up very early in the morning so she could do that before she would go to work.
Hmm.
I was working from home at that point in time, so it was easy for me to get over there for an early morning appointment, drive together, have the discussion with the doctor, the OBGYN, have that kind of fun excitement. When we got to the first hear the heartbeat, I mean,
Mm.
we had so much anticipation of that leading into it, and then that moment that it happened, recording it on the phone, and just so much excitement in those appointments. It really became an event that we looked forward to, and then stop and get Starbucks or a breakfast sandwich before we started our day. And
Yeah.
as those appointments became more regular, it was again one of those just building of positive anticipation. And at the time, looking back, never once thinking of any kind of other outcome than what
Yeah.
you would expect.
Yeah. Yeah. It's when you're so excited to hear good news, it's hard to even imagine bad news. So pregnancy sounded like everything was going well. Any major hiccups? Morning sickness? Did you gain sympathy weight? Did you everything going well? I guess.
Yeah, it was. So this was, as I mentioned, our
Mm-hmm.
first child. This was all new experience for us. We were kind of going into it, or I was probably more so than Katie, with kind of some naivety, right? Of
Yeah.
you don't really know the process. I didn't know. I have a brother who has a son, certainly other family members and cousins who have gone through the
Yeah.
pregnancy and had a child. But in my mind, hey, everything was going according to plan, as it should.
Yeah.
There's a moment, I want to say Katie was probably about 8 months or so pregnant. I was on a work trip as travel had opened up a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and Katie had a little bit of bleeding and called me in a panic, and I knew right away something was a little bit off.
Mm.
Talked to her. She talked with her doctor. Was go to the hospital immediately,
Yeah.
and she did that. And I remember texting her, "Hey, nothing you can do right now. I'm with the doctors. They're going to take some scans." Just praying in this meeting that I was a part of that everything
Yeah.
would be fine. Everything's going to go well. I had sheer panic kind of in my bones for the first time. Katie had been at that hospital for some time, kept updating me with texts. Heart rate's good, blood pressure's good. From the baby's perspective, the heart rate
Mm-hmm.
was good. Everything seemed to be normal. Just a little bit of of spotting or bleeding, which they attributed, hey, it's quite normal at this stage,
Hmm.
nothing to be too alarmed about.
Okay.
So when I got, that text and then followed up with a phone call, certainly nerves were calm. I left the meeting though, of course, and started the drive home as I got
Yeah.
that call initially. So I got that call in the car and on the way back. But that was a moment where I thought, wow, maybe maybe there is, some things here that we have to just look and be concerned about. There
Hmm.
was nothing health wise that came back from Katie's checkup, but that was the first moment and really the only moment, Lee, during her 9 months of pregnancy that there was a little bit of a
Oh
scare, if
yeah.
you will.
And as a man, there's nothing you can do. Like,
And
it's
especially as I was 2 states away and 6
yeah,
hours drive, just that feeling of, "Oh my gosh, I'm not here," and I made that commitment, I won't be traveling again
yeah.
until we have our child.
Mm. Oh man, it that even as you were telling me, I just was like, oh man, that's got to be a feeling of helplessness for you. As you said, 2 states away, there's nothing that you could do from there. So, what happens after that?
Yeah, so like I said, that was about 8 months in. We had, up until that point, an incredible journey.
Mm-hmm.
Afterwards, that was leading into the summer months. So I apologize. No, that was prior to some summer months. But again, throughout the pregnancy, going on vacations, doing some things,
Yeah,
having kind of those experiences as I say, the three of us, even though our daughter Everly was in the womb
yeah,
still.
in utero.
But that last month, it was really just let's we're almost to that finish line, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's buckle up. We're going to have some exciting times ahead, and that's when we, started to do the family stuff, right? Of setting up the nursery,
Yeah,
getting the car seat set up, all of those fun things that we were just brewing about, in anticipation of what's to come. Couple weeks out, maybe a week or two away from the delivery date. Her due date was October 31st of 2021 was the anticipated due date.
mm-hmm.
All along, we joked around a Halloween baby, and a lot of people, mentioned that as we shared the news with them. But it was about a week out. Had set up Katie's car with the car seat, and we had our,
Yeah,
you know, delivery room bag packed and ready by the door. And I remember cleaning out her car, and on the car seat, had it in the center of the back seats, all buckled up, ready to go. And Katie had still been going to work every day. And I put a post-it on there, something about, I'll be here in about a week, mom. Can't wait to see you. And so that way she could see that whenever on her rear view mirror. And, again, a memory that just sticks with you as far as one of those moments that just complete and utter joy.
yeah.
And about 5 or 6 days later, just the crushing nightmare that we've been enduring. So, maybe I can, move into, the day before Everly came into this world. It was 2 days before the incident happened, so October 30th was a Saturday. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Normal night, our days and nights had become pretty, just relaxing it at
Yeah,
home. And I think we were watching some college football, watching some football, or doing something on a Saturday night, and kind of wrapping up the night, probably 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And Everly, who we didn't really settle on the name at that point, so we weren't
yeah.
saying Everly, and we didn't know the gender either. I
Oh,
should have
you
said that
didn't?
at the start. Yeah,
Oh,
it was. We chose not to know the gender. So we didn't really have a day. We just knew baby was in there, and at that point in time, baby was kicking, and which was a good sign, of course.
mm-hmm.
And Saturday night, it was comical at the time. Lots of kicks, and then just this incredible kick, probably the
Yeah,
biggest one that Katie had felt. And I saw it on her belly because she had her shirt rolled up because of all the kicking that were happening. And it
yeah.
was just like we both kind of laughed and chuckled. And I remember going up to Katie's belly and saying, "Hey, you're about ready to come out. We can't wait to see you." And it's probably getting tight in there, kind of little message.
Mhm.
And I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but that was likely the last move of Everly. And
Oh,
so that was the night before. So the next morning, Sunday morning, and it's been a tradition to have a bit of a Sunday breakfast, just Katie and I, and so made a nice big Sunday breakfast. This was the due date. This was October
yeah.
31st now,
Yeah.
and we knew it could be that day. It could be any day at any minute at that point. So, woke up feeling pretty good and excited. It was a beautiful sunny day. Had breakfast, and I remember looking over at Katie, and she didn't say anything, but I knew on her face there was just a little bit of concern. And I said, "What's up, Katie? What's happening?" And she says, "I don't know. I just haven't felt any movement since I've been up."
Oh.
And this was probably 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. I said, "Well, okay, let's keep an eye on it." Not really thinking much of it at the time.
Yeah.
We finished out breakfast, and I think we just kind of hung out a little bit around the couch, did a couple, cleaned up little things around the house, and Katie was still demonstrating that concern on her
Mhm.
face. And I knew something was agitating her, and was up, and said, let's reach out to the doctor, right? That's what they're there for. Let's have a quick discussion with them. And we called it. Katie called the doctors, and at that point, I think anytime you start to engage your doctor, you get a little bit nervous, but especially now,
Yeah.
and a little bit nervous, but also thinking, hey, this is just hypersensitivity right now. We're at the due date, high anticipation of everything. So in the back of my mind, I'm really thinking everything's okay. This is part of the process, and we
Mhm.
have had such an easy ride all along. Wouldn't it be right? Last couple of hours, it just becomes a little bit nerve wracking. Talked to the doctor, and the gentleman. It was just the on call line for Katie's OB, and the gentleman really didn't have much concern for Katie. He says, "Hey, I'm looking at your records. You've had the past 9 months, no concerns, no health issues. You've had great movement um, throughout your pregnancy. Sometimes it just takes a little bit for your baby to wake up and start to move." So he said, have a pop, and take a couple walks around the block if you can,
Mhm.
and see if that starts to wake them up, wake your baby up. So that's what we did. So, had a bit of a drink for Katie. She had, cola or something, and we did a lap around our community at that time, and ran into a neighbor, and there was definitely nervousness on our face, but put the happy face on to our neighbor
Yeah.
of, hey, today's the due date, and
Oh.
went back inside. And now it's like early part of the afternoon, and so I mentioned I'm from Pittsburgh, so a Steelers football game was on.
Mhm.
And we kind of say, hey, let's just see if we get some movement back. I'm trying
Yeah.
to keep things like calm, and it's going to be okay. Nothing to be overly upset about, or let's just see
Yeah.
see if there's further movement or anything. And so yeah, we're watching a football game Sunday afternoon, and we get through a couple hours of that, and Katie's still has that face on. And we're getting close to the end of the football game, and I said, okay, you know what, let's just get to the hospital. I think you're clearly concerned. Let's just go and see what they have to say and get checked out. So we kind of made that
Yeah.
agreement. Let's go and get checked out.
Now, at this time, how are you feeling? Are you because watching your own wife have concern also because I remember because we were sitting in church and my wife turned to me and was like, I haven't felt Brannon in a while. And that, I was sort of concerned, but I was like, hey, we're at the end of the pregnancy. There's not a whole lot of movement room. So how were you feeling? Were you
So
as
yeah,
concerned?
I had that kind of like a little bit of that concern. Like,
Mhm.
um, I'm concerned that Katie's not, you know, not feeling
Mhm.
confident and comfortable right here.
Yeah.
But again, even at that point in time, I don't think it really hit me that there could be devastation
It could be
here.
anything.
Again, I look back those days leading up to this event, having a family friend come over and drop off some things for us, and who had who had a child that's about 7 or 8 months older than what Everly would have been, and she says, "Hey, you're at the finish line. Baby's baked. There's nothing to worry about."
Yeah.
And I think that just kind of resonated with me in my mentality of really what could go wrong here. We've had excellent appointments. The heart rate, every single thing has been perfect.
Yeah.
Katie's actually felt perfect. She would say that often. I've never felt better. And so I had a little bit of nervousness.
Mhm.
And I remember driving to the hospital, trying to keep Katie calm, probably trying to crack a silly joke or do something like that, right? And
Yeah.
I remember as we pulled up to the hospital, I don't know if I ever said it out loud. I can't remember, but I remember thinking, okay, well, this is good practice for tomorrow or the next day whenever, we
Wow.
get checked out here and everything's good, but just not
Yeah.
ready to deliver. Because that was, I think, my first time actually. We didn't do a practice run. I mean, it was easy to get to. I knew the general location, but my first time actually going into the parking lot of the hospital.
Mhm.
And so that was my thinking, Lee, as I pulled in thinking, okay, we'll get checked out. We'll be able to get back and have a Sunday dinner. And like I said, this will be great. I'll get to
Yeah.
know the lay of the land for tomorrow or the next day whenever our baby's ready to come to this world.
And the sad thing is just the innocence of naivety, as you were saying, like, you didn't know that there could be something bad. It's all just been good news thus far. I'm so sorry.
And so we got up to the area of the hospital, um,
Mhm.
and we sat there. And looking back, I'm thinking how foolish. I mean, I remember looking at like the NFL football scores, right, and doing something again to try to distract Katie a little bit. And at that point, it I think Katie's nervousness started to really come to me a little bit more. But I was still in that mentality of, hey, we're gonna get checked out. They'll just let us know, hey, baby, she's well, again, at the time we didn't know it was
Yeah.
a she, but the baby's just positioned in a different way, and probably not feeling that movement.
Mhm.
Or again, my thing is that it's got to be really tight. Maybe there's no room to move, and that's normal. So they had taken us back into this little room, and this was on October 31st, so it was Halloween. So there was
All the spooky decorations and everything.
decorations in the hospital. Some of the nurses were dressed up, and I think probably as they always would, right? They
Mhm.
come into the room and kind of with that jovial attitude. Hey, happy Halloween! Hope your day's going well, and da da da. And we talked to the nurse, and she says, "Okay, well, let's get the machine over here, and we'll check the heart rate." So there was a younger nurse that came in, and she first put that on Katie's belly. And again, we had done this countless times, right? Every event into the OB,
Yeah.
just for the checkup, and she couldn't find the heartbeat. And she says, "You know what? Let me get another machine because I don't know if this one's working. It might not have charge in it." And when she stepped out of that room, that's when panic started to hit a little bit internally. I can only imagine Katie's panic at that time. I think I was still very outwardly trying to provide positivity of going to
Yeah.
be okay, and
Yeah.
let's wait for the next machine. And that's when the nervousness and scared started to come to life.
Yeah.
And so another nurse. In fact, I think there were 2 or 3 now that had come in, and that shocks you anytime you see more than one, right?
Yeah.
And had every thought in my mind that the heartbeat is gonna be found here, and we're gonna get on our way back to Sunday night. And they came in, and another nurse, a little bit more of an older nurse, did the machine again, and she couldn't find the heartbeat. And I don't remember if it was exactly at that moment or if I think they did do an image test,
Hmm.
and then they had come back in, and I believe that's when they shared with us that our baby no longer has a heartbeat, and it was just shock.
Yeah.
Um, I remember Katie just putting her head back in a way and kind of closing her eyes. I just was in disbelief. It was something I never would have expected. I didn't anticipate that being what was said, and I don't want to say accepted that, but we kind of thought, well, maybe that's not right.
Yeah.
Um, we didn't really ask to keep checking or checking again, but it was just like this complete shock that had absorbed us immediately, and it was almost shocking that we had no emotion of tears, or we didn't scream or do anything. It was just, what do we do? What did you just say to us? And that was the moment that I could just hear everything. I could hear the clock tick. I could see, I could feel the sweat in my fingers. I could just sense the sadness that was starting in Katie. And we just, I think, embraced, but it was like, what is happening?
I'm just seeing myself, and it was almost the exact same situation. One nurse couldn't find our son's heartbeat, and it wasn't until the second nurse came in where it was like, "Wait a second, something's going on."
Yeah, and I it was just, at that point, I think that the nurses were shocked, and I remember as a nurse came back in to perhaps give us some tissues or comfort us somehow of, "Is there anyone that you want us to contact?" kind of thing, and I just kept remembering to say, "You need to contact, Katie's OBGYN doctor." I say, "You
Yeah.
need to contact her doctor. She's been with us this entire time. Everything has been fine up until now. You need to inform her, and we need to have her here." And they said, "Well, she's not on call. We'll look to contact her and engage with her." And I remember that vividly, and I don't know really why. I don't know if I was thinking at that point, well, maybe she can look at this and tell us differently, because she's
Yeah.
always given us that positive and good news.
Yeah.
But that was something, and I think that kind of gave that nurse a reason to step away. And then Katie and I think we just sat in silence, and again, it was this odd emotion of shock, I suppose, because we didn't even tear up at that initial moment. It was
Mhm.
just complete blackout almost, if you will, that you're living in this moment that I don't know Katie personally. I don't know that I've ever asked her, in fact, but everything, my senses were just so amazingly sharp. Like I said, I could hear everything, I could feel and sense everything, but yet I had no kind of sad emotion of those tears coming out or anything like that. I remember Katie needing to use the bathroom, and she made it to her delivery date. It was full 9 months, and
Mhm.
so she needed help up and helped her go to the bathroom. And I think I remember just putting my head against the wall saying, what is happening? What has just happened? This can't be real. Can this be
Yeah.
real? And then I think as Katie came back out, some of that emotion started to then happen, and the
Yeah.
reality bit came in. but there was still this perhaps underlying belief that maybe they don't have it right, and maybe our baby's still in there living. So I think even up until that point of delivery, it was this sense of maybe there's some hope,
Mhm.
even though that scientifically, I think there's no hope.
Now, after you guys had gotten the news that there was no heartbeat, did they give you did they tell you all your options? Like go home or stay here or
They did. So, a bit of time had passed, and so a doctor or nurse had come in, and that was it. I mean, that was exactly it, right? They gave us some options of, you have an option to go back home and spend the next 24 hours as you are. They had no reason to believe Katie's health was in at risk.
Mhm.
So they had stated to us, you can go home if you'd like and spend another day. They didn't want anything beyond 24 hours, but that was an option. Another option was to induce and begin the delivery process. And
Mhm.
they would start that immediately that night. I think it was a very quick decision that Katie had said, I don't want to go home now. I would want to move forward in the inducement. And again, naivety on my end. I'm thinking, well, that's going to probably happen through a C-section, right? And you're
Yeah.
you're not going to
Yeah.
go through a natural delivery at this point. And I'm asking
Yeah.
this question to the doctor because in my mind, I'm thinking C-section, and this will be quick. There's no, what you're telling us is that the baby has died,
Yeah.
and there's not going to be a delivery process, and that's going to happen very quickly. Have some type of surgery to do that, and then we would go from there. And of course that was the complete opposite. So at that point, Katie had said, I'd like to start the doctors had informed us, no, we will go through an inducement, and we prefer to go through a natural delivery as it's much safer. And they had kind of assured us that you're close to the delivery at any point anyway. It's going to be a quick natural delivery. And so that was the suggested approach anyway. um,
Mhm.
And so I had, at that point, we agreed to that. They said, we'll need about 20 to 30 minutes to prepare delivery room. Is there anything else that we can do for you? And we said no. And at that point that they'd stepped away, you know, Katie said, we need to tell our parents.
Oh.
And so that was the first time I looked at my phone, since we were out in the waiting room. And I had a voicemail from my grandfather. My grandfather, who's 90 years old now, he was 80, 89 at that time. He very healthy guy, and we have a good close relationship. I looked at my phone. I had a voicemail from him, and so before I thought about calling my parents and Katie's parents, I listened to that voicemail, and it was I still have it. I mean, it was, "Hey Seth, and happy Halloween. You can't believe how many trick or treaters I have over here. We have to have 50 or 60, and I hope all is well. I know today is the delivery date. I can't wait to get one more trick or treater over here." And that was his message. And that was the moment that it just hit, man. It hit, hearing that message. And like I said, it was that was the tough call. And and that's why I told Katie, I don't know how I'm gonna tell my parents and her parents on Halloween night here what's just happened.
Yeah.
But she said, we have to tell them. So a couple I don't know how long, a couple minutes, 10 minutes may
Yeah.
have passed, and we kind of pulled myself together a bit and called my mom first. And yeah, I mean, first answer is, hey, do you have some good news for us? Do we have do we have a new baby in the family? And that's when I just had to tell her, Mom, I have some very, very sad news. And we our baby's passed. And she just shrilled, what do you mean? And I just told her, you know we came into the hospital, Katie wasn't feeling movement, and they've just informed us that our baby has no heartbeat. So it was a really tough call.
Yeah.
She had, family and friends at their house.
Mhm.
My son, my brother and his son and friends were there. So it was, I can imagine a difficult evening for everybody. So informed them, brief conversation. It wasn't very long. And then calling Katie's parents was, I knew, even more difficult because, my parents, you can usually have, I can tell them a little bit easier. I just didn't know what I was going to say to Katie's mom. And she answered right away. And I think same kind of reaction from her is, "Hey, I'm hoping you have some good," or I don't know what she said, but something along the lines, "You have good news. Is the baby here?" And yeah, just a big pause and said, "I've got terrible news. It's the, our baby's passed." And she just similar reaction, and it was a very brief call. It was. I remember her telling Katie's dad. I could hear that over the phone, and just kind of silence, and just kind of, "Whatever you guys need, let me know and let us know, and should we come to the hospital, kind of thing, and no need to come right now. We'll keep you
Mhm.
up to date." And at that point as well, although Katie's health was fine, I wanted to be sure that her parents knew that Katie was doing okay. I think it was an automatic kind of trigger. Now it was that focus of, could anything worse happen too? And so I wanted to give some assurance back to her parents that Katie was doing okay.
Yeah.
So from that point, they wheeled us over to the delivery room. It was just, again, one of those moments. I'm a real visionary person, right? I had visioned out so much of this,
Mhm.
and of course not in this framework,
Yeah.
but
Never in that.
I've never been in a delivery room before, but it was exactly what I had pictured and imagined. I remember going, some during pregnancy, we had gone through some virtual kind of support groups, and they had shared with us different things of, like, how you want to think about planning for your delivery. Lights down low, if you want music playing, having the right number of blankets, and all those different things that I had already pre-envisioned, like how the room will look, right? And it's going to
Yeah.
be this great welcoming. And we get in there, and it was like that, Lee. It was calming. The lights were down low. Off to the corner was the weigh station,
Yeah.
and they had the monitors and everything set up, and there were some different things that you would anticipate seeing in a maternity area of, crafts and some children things and hi mommy kind of things. And I'm just thinking, this is exactly how this is supposed to be, except it's not.
Yeah.
So that was kind of that first visual and experience. And then they got Katie set up into the bed in the room, and started to go through the delivery plan. We're going to induce you, and here's what that means. And then in the
Mhm.
next hour or so, we're going to have somebody to come up here to give you an epidural. That was a choice for Katie. And we're going to have a simple and quick pregnancy because they said you're already induced naturally, and we're just going to get this through. But it wasn't. It was extremely
Mhm.
long and enduring. It was, gosh, now I don't have it written down, but it was a 7 or 8 hour long inducement. It was
Oh, yeah.
extremely long. The doctors were actually quite surprised. I remember all night long, the area was, the delivery bed was in an area, and there was a chair there, and then kind of farther away, it was a pretty big room. There was kind of a couch area or bench area, but I did not want to leave Katie. And so
Yeah.
I remember kind of dozing in and out, just kind of hands on her, me and my, kind of holding on to her in this terrible ergonomic position. It was just the longest, craziest night of my life, in the sense of all of these thoughts, like, has this really happened?
Yeah.
What is going on? Katie, I think, was in and out a little bit just from her own tiredness, but I didn't sleep at all. Maybe a few brief minutes had kind of passed from exhaustion. But then the next morning they had come, and or throughout the night they had come, and that next morning they said, we got to get you starting to push. We've got to get this moving along, and are you ready to do that? And Katie said, yeah, let's start. And again, they kind of assured us we're a couple pushes and we should start to be there. And it was quite a while. It was like an hour and a half of pushing, and really difficult for Katie. I think from a positional perspective, she was starting to feel pain in different areas.
Oh,
Again, my mind is like, this is almost exactly what I envisioned of, Katie in the kind of the stirrups, me
yeah.
holding her hand. And it was different because I was trying, and even the nurses we were giving that positive encouragement, right? Like, you're there, you're almost there. And again, me never experiencing this before, I'm thinking, wow, she's almost there. And really it wasn't. There was a little bit of hair coming out, and there was still a long way to go. But I'm thinking, this is so incredible, but yet so difficult and devastating to see this happening.
Yeah.
And
You're rushing to an end that has no happy ending.
exactly right. You knew the outcome, and I think going back to that belief of, they never hooked up a heart rate monitor for the
Oh,
baby while we were in that delivery room, because they had told us already that the heartbeat was no longer there and that our baby had passed. And
mhm.
so we kind of were thinking, well, maybe
Maybe,
there's hope.
maybe, yeah.
Maybe they just, again, they didn't see it the first time, and there's nothing monitoring them now. So we had that little bit of faith and hope, and that hope quickly ended as 11:40 in the morning came on November 1st, and that's when our baby girl, we still say, born on
Yeah.
that moment.
I'm so sorry. I was going to say, meeting your beautiful daughter. Explain the emotions if you can of seeing her, yet knowing.
It was, I don't know that words can describe the conflicting emotions that I had seeing her come out,
Yeah.
because she was absolutely perfect. There wasn't one area that would be of concern or an abnormality, right? She had one little kind of a little bit of a cut on her face, which we later learned, I think, was part of the, her skin, we learned, was quickly deteriorating. So we suspect that
Mhm.
was an element of why her face had that little bit of a cut. It was actually around her eyelid. But otherwise, she looked absolutely perfect. She was a bit of a purple hueish color, but her face, her nose, her ears, her fingers, legs just were absolutely amazing to look at and see. And Lee, you had mentioned it in your story of Brennan, that one area that I quickly noticed was her skull was very soft
Yeah.
and not jointed well.
Yeah.
Um, but otherwise, everything was just unbelievably perfect. And so when she was born, um, the doctor looked at me and said, "Would you like to share the gender to your wife? I know that you don't know." And so I said, "Katie, we have a beautiful daughter." And I did cut the umbilical cord. And then we had already planned that immediately after delivery, that Katie wanted to embrace our baby
Oh,
without any cleaning up or anything. She wanted that very first minute
yeah.
of skin to skin contact. That they had been together for this long 9 months, and Katie just wanted the immediacy of holding her. And of course, she had every right, and
Yeah. Yeah.
of course, every I can imagine her expectation of what that first moment should have been like. But there was a team of doctors all around Katie, and what again, I share that Katie had endured this long delivery, and throughout that, it was kind of scary. There was some blood loss and things, so there
Mm,
was a more of a team of doctors that had arrived during the later stages
yeah.
and really monitoring Katie now. And whenever the I cut the umbilical cord, and we said immediately Katie wants to hold her, and I have this really beautiful but sad picture of this kind of on the peripheral, this team of doctors now that was really focused and monitored of Katie's health.
Hmm.
And I took a step back and took a picture from above, and you can just see Katie's face so vividly in my mind, and our baby daughter just laying there perfectly as you would expect a living baby to look, right? The
Yeah.
picture you could you probably wouldn't know.
Yeah.
And it's actually funny because I see that picture, and Katie and I had throughout that very long night had been talking about, we got to be strong and embrace our baby and do these type of things. And sadness had overcome us at moments in time as well. And I look at that picture though, and Katie probably will never admit it or acknowledge it, but there's this moment of pure strength that I see out of her face of, okay, this has just happened. Now I'm going to take every single minute that I can with our daughter. And it was just like that face. I don't know that I've ever seen that kind of look in Katie's face. And I don't know that she'll ever,
Yeah.
maybe she doesn't believe it or see it, but it was a face of strength of, I just went through this terrible thing. And we weren't even looking beyond yet. But it was that moment that I said, okay, I've got to also be strong and find a way to embrace this moment.
It's such a beautiful way to say about any parenthood. You've got to embrace and be strong. Embrace and be strong.
Absolutely. So from that point on, we kind of made this commitment at that moment, somewhat unsaid, but I think we talked about it that we're gonna have to think about how do we take these next couple of days with our daughter. And immediately at that point too, I should say, the doctors kind of dispersed a little bit. We had a nurse take Everly and weigh her, and I was able to go and get pictures of her. I don't think I ever confirmed it with Katie, but prior to delivery and prior to finding out this terrible news, we kind of aligned to the name Everly.
Oh yeah.
Um, but it was around that moment in time, I said, I think I said for the first time, let's continue to hold our daughter Everly. You know, that was I think right at the time of the weighing and things, and so that was that moment. And then from then we went quite quickly. It felt like, the doctors, the nurses came in wanting to check over Katie. We were still in the delivery room, and they had, given us some time and space just to hold Everly. They'd wrapped her up, and then they came back and they bathed her. And that was something that, kind of watched and
Hmm.
just sad, just sadness to see
Yeah.
a limp baby. And that was also a bit of the moments we were learning more about the sensitivity around her skin and how delicate and fragile every part of her was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we cleaned her, and then we had a few hours just of on our own. The doctors gave us a lot of space at that point, so just having the moments to talk, to talk with her and hold her and wrap her, and it was just her and I. And at that point too, now my parents had wanted to come down to the hospital, and so they had come down earlier, and they had to wait some time. And boy, was that a tough moment as well, because Katie and I was on the delivery bed with Katie, and Katie's embracing Everly. And again, I go back to that visionary mind of mine. This is exactly probably what it would have been like, except with a living baby, and the laughs and the cries and feeding. And then how exciting would that be for for my parents to be able to come in and see that moment of the three of us as a family
Yeah.
for the first time. And so we were in that position that I was visioning, and then my parents came in, and yeah, I mean, we introduced them, and just sadness. Everyone was crying. I don't think my dad wanted to really hold her for whatever reason, just maybe not comfortable, or wanting to make sure that giving us our
Yeah.
space. My mom had held her for quite a bit of time, and we kind of had a little bit of a somber, just my parents, Katie, myself, and Everly, of a little bit of time there. And so as we continued throughout the day, they ended up moving us. I should back up one moment.
Mhm.
Prior to us moving into another area in the hospital, we had a bereavement doula come in.
Oh, okay.
And the bereavement doula, introduced herself, and again, thinking back in the COVID period, that everyone had masks on, and even to get my parents in, that wouldn't have been normal if it
Yeah.
would have been a normal delivery. But in our case, they made that exception, which we were so thankful for. But we met this, masked up bereavement doula, and we knew we were going to be moving rooms here. We didn't know how long we had with Everly. And I remember her coming in, introducing and talking to us a little about her, and I had no idea what her role. I didn't know what she was
Yeah.
there for, and we introduced Everly to her, and we were kind of being friendly there. But I was thinking, she mispronounced Everly's name the first few times. She was kind of, asking us a lot of questions about how the pregnancy was. Was this expected, unexpected? How are we doing? Those kind of questions.
Mhm.
And I remember just thinking, I, really don't want you here, don't need you
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure why you're here, but being pretty nice people, we kind of didn't say anything outwardly. And she said, "Hey, do you mind if I follow you down into your next room that you're going to go into, and we can talk a little bit more?" And I'm thinking, I really prefer not,
Yeah.
but that's fine if you'd like to come down and we can talk a little bit more. So they had transported Katie, and a bit of a regret, perhaps. I know they put her into a mobile crate for baby.
Mhm.
They'd asked me if I wanted to carry her or if Katie wanted to, and for whatever reason, I don't know why we declined that. I just remember saying no, just put her in that, so that way she can move safely down, and I'll grab all the bags. And I really regret that, of not wanting of us having that opportunity to carry her to where we were going. Um, so we get into the room, and it was more of of an area, post delivery area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Thankfully it was, I think, away from other areas, so we didn't hear kind of the joys of others, but I knew that we were around others that had
Mhm.
successful birth. But that was our room for the next 2.5 days. So we got settled in, and our bereavement doula had kind of knocked on the door and said, "Hey, would you guys mind if I continue the discussion?" Again, I'm thinking in the back of my head, not really. I just need
Yeah.
time alone. But I'm so very glad that I didn't say anything, because at that moment, she gave us a little bit of light in this dark moment, in the sense
Hmm.
of, we really didn't know what to do at that point. We
Yeah.
knew we were just going to sit there and look at our baby and hold her. And she pushed us. I think she asked us that question, and we kind of alluded to that's what we would likely do. And she pushed us to say, "You can do so much more."
Oh.
And she said, "You need to take 1,000 pictures. You need to cut her fingernails and cut her hair and dress her and take her outside, and I can help you do all those things." I
Oh,
said,
that's
"Okay, that might be a little bit better than just sitting in here sobbing." And so I kind of
yeah.
looked at Katie, and we both kind of said, "Okay, we'll be in for that." I think that moment. Then she said, "Okay, I'll be whatever you need me to do. I'm here for you guys." And so she arranged us to get footprint taken,
Mhm.
handprint taken. We had countless pictures that she was able to help get for us and get with us. Cut her hair, showed us how to swaddle her. She says, "Why don't you guys go outside for a walk?" And so in the room, there was a courtyard in the hospital.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we were able to get permission to take a wheelchair for Katie because she was unable to walk.
Yeah.
Wheelchaired Katie out, and we got to have an experience outside. And it was just a really incredible kind of day that we had there. Later that evening, there was a the bereavement doula had left for the day that afternoon or early evening, and we had a care package that was in the room for us.
Mhm.
And really basic, just kind of a white box. It had a ribbon and some things on it. So we opened it up and looked at it, and we learned from the nurse who dropped it off that said this is from a local organization who pulls these care packages together. And sadly, when this event happens,
Yeah.
we would like to offer this to you if you'd like to have it. And he said, of course, sure, that's really appreciative. And so we, had this beautiful box of various things, a little cap, a blanket, an ornament, some necklace and a wristlet. And one of the things that I really then took to was a bit of a journal. It's hard to see the footprints of a baby's footprints
Yeah.
on here. So from that moment, I said, "This is incredible." And so we really looked at all of those things, laid them out, dressed Everly in some of those outfits and in the coverings. But I really became intentional from that moment to capture every experience that we were going to have within this journal. And I'm so happy that I did leave because that night, whenever my parents came back and my brother and his girlfriend at the time, we celebrated almost in a sense that there was that excitement of having a family together, right?
Yeah.
Again, I go
Yeah.
back to that visionary of they brought in some food for us and exactly how I have pictured it the first time meeting our child of we're going to have kind of fun conversation and have hospital dinner together while we're all looking at the baby. And we had a little bit of that.
Mhm.
And it was just so sad, but also it gave me that kind of, wow, this is what parenthood must feel like, and so
Yeah.
incredible. And
Oh,
we shared with them all the experiences that we did, taking finger footprints and handprints and going outside and all of the gifts that we were getting from this care package. We laid it out and showed it to them. It was just an interesting night of a feeling, again, such conflicting emotion. And
yeah.
it was sadness, of course, and uncertainty and what had happened. But it was just also that element of togetherness in a way. And then that kind of subsided at nighttime. That nightfall came quick, and that was our first night in this segregated room. And so I opened up our call today as a memory that I'll never forget of Everly is her silhouette.
Yeah.
And that night, again, no sleep. I could hear every tick of the clock, every wheel that was moved from a nurse's station out in the hall, every little thing I was just so hyper aware of. And as I'm thinking there all night long as to what did we just experience and what is Katie enduring, I just laid on my side at the guest kind of bench bed.
Yeah.
And I remember just staring right at Everly. And I can just so vividly imagine or remember that silhouette of her facial profile. And I ran my hands over that facial profile so many times that night as I would get up and just think, I can't believe our daughter is here, but she's not.
Yeah.
And it was just so crushing at night. And again, we got up in the morning, and that's the reality continued to set in my mind, really of what had happened and transpired. But that's when we doubled down again and looked at each other and we've got to be strong and enjoy these moments while we can. And so that
Yeah.
day too was again another day full of experiences and activities. The hospital was so gracious to allow our dog to come in. And so we got to spend room in a separate, spend time in a separate room with our dog, Bentley, Everly, myself, my parents, Katie's parents later came on in later in the day. But it was just this conflicting time of like, this is what it should have been like.
Yeah.
And we had stuffed animals and books and everything that you could think of that we did that entire day. And then again, as Katie's parents came that night and some visitors, I mean, we shared so much that what we did, and it was just so proud of, hey, this is the little hat that we have from Everly, and yeah, these cards of, I mean, it was just that kind of experience of oddity of being so excited to share that with others.
Yeah.
But again, it was almost like this surreal experience that we were living.
Yeah, the dichotomy of such contrasting emotions and feelings. The love and the joy and the happiness and the sad and misery of death and you
It
know.
was just all unfolded in one. And so that was our that evening would have been our last night that we had to spend with Everly at the hospital, knowing the next day, we really never had any. The hospital we never felt that they were rushing us or
Mhm.
pushing us. They gave us so much space, and I really, looking back, appreciate their progressiveness of how they had helped
Yeah.
support us through that period of time. Their openness to allow guests when guests were otherwise not allowed, to allow our dog. And so we didn't feel the rush, but we knew that next day we were planning that that would be the day that we needed to leave. And
Mhm.
so that night we read stories, we held her, we changed her, we did all of those things that again we want
Yeah.
to do over and over again.
Yeah.
The next day was really challenging, just dressing her and cleaning her. And as we started to get closer to that hour that we said that we would be looking to depart, it just became so tough. And it was
Yeah.
just like, how can we leave our child here?
Yeah.
And we know it's not like watching a living child where you need to worry if they fall and trip or anything, but we just kept asking you, will you take care of her? Will you be able to watch over her? And that parental instinct just was so much there, Lee. And it was just so difficult to leave. And we just kept going back to kiss and hold and touch and everything that we could while we had those moments. And
Yeah.
I can't imagine what was going through Katie's mind as she was wheeled out of that hospital, but I know that was probably one of the hardest moments of my life, to walk away from our daughter.
Yeah. And Seth, as you said, the parental feelings, the parental protection that you feel for your child, you are a parent. Your daughter Everly is yours forever, and that feeling of being separated and torn away from your child it's so terrible. It is so heavy.
It was, yeah, by far the toughest moment throughout all of that experience. Like I said, there was some happy moments that we
Yeah.
got to experience during
Yeah.
those couple of days, and then as we got home that night, it was again that feeling of surreal reality of, you think you're going to come home with a baby in the
Yeah.
baby seats, and that of course didn't happen. And we get home and it's dark and cold. This is now November the 3rd or 4th, and we had somebody drop off food, and I remember eating chicken parmesan at the island of our kitchen,
Yeah.
and just kind of in silence and thinking, what do we do next? Like, we have to plan a funeral now.
Yeah.
And it was just mind blowing that that was our what we had to do now. And we have to think about, how do we tell others? How do we get the word out? What do we want to do from a funeral perspective? And
Yeah.
so I would say a night or two had gone by. It's funny because we had a good circle of family that kept dropping off food, and for whatever reason, it kept being Italian food. So I have this terrible connection now with chicken parmesan and this
Uh,
experience, because that was a common drop off food. And I remember the second or so day after we were home now, went over to my parents, and we needed to plan for a funeral service. And so my parents thankfully, did a lot. They reached out to, you know,
A
to
parlor.
arrange funeral support and services. Sadly, my grandmother had passed away in February of March of 2021. I
Mm.
say sadly, but she was also 94 years old, so she had
Yeah.
celebrated an unbelievable life.
Yeah.
But we had that kind of process, and you know, the unfortunately the folks that we needed to connect with already knew about that. So my mom was able to take a lead role in helping to organize. But beyond that, as far as organization of connecting the right folks, but beyond that, Katie and I really wanted to do and organize this the way that we wanted to. So, you know, we spent the next few days really doing what we wanted to do to celebrate Everly.
Mhm.
And so, you know, creating an obituary, really helping to organize what we wanted to do from a funeral perspective. And Lee, I apologize. I don't recall for Brennan, but I remember going into the funeral parlor and going down into the basement, somewhat of a basement. It was an office, but
Yeah.
them showing us caskets.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
surreal. What am I doing here? Kind of a feeling.
I had no clue they made caskets that small. Like, it never crossed my mind. As we were standing there with options for caskets, it was like, why do you guys have caskets like this? And it's
Right.
because of situations like ours.
Absolutely. And I recall the same thinking of why would you have this that you can pull out and show to people?
Yeah.
And then how are we supposed to decide on something? Right.
Yeah.
And it was just a very surreal moment and dialogue. And you know, appreciate the person's job that has to do that kind of work.
Yeah.
And she was fantastic in helping to support us and providing us things because we wanted to do perhaps a bit different of a service in the sense of we had so many pictures, we had so many tangible memories that we
Yeah.
wanted to show and highlight for people to understand that we had an incredible couple of days with our daughter.
Yeah.
So they gave us the autonomy and the ability to set up the room that we wanted. You know, I think it's common that folks do some pictorial videos and things like that nowadays. I mean, that we did that, but just so many of those things that we were able to do, and they accommodated us with and giving us the time. And I recall as we planned everything out, and it was the week after Everly was born
Mhm.
on a weekend. Um, you know, I recall getting to the funeral and we had already aligned that we wanted to have an open casket, and they had given us some indication that that might not be possible
Oh,
based upon the look of the baby. And,
yeah.
you know, I passed over. We did decide to do an autopsy on her. And they had said, hey, given that takes a few additional days and
Mhm.
the procedure that's involved in that, we don't know what your baby may look like.
Yeah.
And we were really adamant. We want to have an open casket. We want others to be able to meet and see
Yeah.
her and be able to know that she was a real person.
Yeah.
She might not have spent a minute of time outside of Katie, but she was living on the earth in that womb.
Yeah.
And when we got to the funeral parlor that day, or funeral home that day, they said, we don't recommend an open casket. We're not sure that you want to do that as a visible presentation, if you will, perhaps poor choice of words, but a funeral service
Yeah.
of Everly. And we said, well, can we see her? They say, if you two would like to, we can take you in and show you her as an open her casket. And they opened the casket for us, Lee, and she was beautiful. She really
Oh,
was. She had certainly changed from the time that we saw her a week ago.
yeah.
Her face was a bit larger, and you know her nose was concaved a little bit, but she was still good looking. And they had put makeup and things on her, and we asked. We said we feel that she actually looks fine, and we really would like to have an open casket. And they agreed to that. I'm so happy that we did because it gave everybody again an opportunity to see her. And again, she
Yeah.
had changed
Mhm.
She was so
Mhm.
perfect, and she actually improved her looks during those couple of days that we had her immediately after delivery. As far as that purple color in the
Yeah.
queue, she actually got a little bit more colorful as far as natural colors and healthy looking colors. But so we did have an open casket, and we had an incredible service of folks and families and friends who came. And the second day that we had a secondary service was the day that we would bury her.
Mhm.
And again, it was an option for us. Do we want to do any kind of things with our pasture and kind of speeches or eulogies or anything like that? And I said, absolutely. We want to celebrate this
Yeah.
and not just move quickly and forget. I was
Yeah.
very intentional as I was starting to read online some things of really difficult, but a lot of regrets that lost parents had had was perhaps not spending more time or feeling that they didn't have the time those few days before their child was buried,
Mhm.
because at that point in time there's no coming back obviously, right?
Yeah.
And so we went through a very thorough service. We had her baptized at that service. We put together a very nice, quite long video of the moments leading in
Yeah.
through the pregnancy and up through it, and then all of the experiences that we had, so others could get some understanding of those couple of days that we
Yeah.
had. And then I wanted to do a speech and a recognition of who she was, and so I wanted to do that and had done that, and I'm glad that I did, because again, it's not often that you have an opportunity to memorialize somebody.
Yeah.
It's certainly nothing I hope that any father ever has to do.
No, no. And Seth, it's very apparent the love and the pride and the dedication you have to your daughter. And just the sheer fact I've been thinking about this, that grieving doula and what was it a female or a male? I think you said it was a female.
It was a female, yeah.
And the help that she had to help you and guide you through some of these days and what you would like to have experiences with your daughter, and that just helped blossom your relationship with her. It's a different type of relationship, and it will bloom and grow and blossom as any relationship has. But Seth, it's so wonderful to hear the love that you have and the dedication that you have for her. As you were talking about having the eulogies, having the celebration of what she's meant to you and to Katie in those videos, it's nice. It's nice to hear.
I appreciate that, Lee, because that's the lasting memories of from us and from so many who got to meet her during that funeral
Yeah,
service. And that's what the hope was of,
yeah,
how can we make sure that this is remembered as part of our family.
yeah. Uh, and too many times people just want to forget. They want to forget bad things in life. A stillborn child is it's not a bad thing. It's a different thing. It's a happy thing and it's a sad thing. It's a lovely thing. The service, from what you've described so far, it seems like a beautiful service.
It really was, Lee. We were again. It was a beautiful service. We had great family and friend support. Again, really not what you'd expect
Yeah,
on any
yeah,
funeral service, right? I think
yeah.
the many of us who've experienced death, it comes in the what I would sadly say a traditional sense of having an opportunity to live a life and
Hmm.
celebrate. And of course, there's countless upon countless deaths that are far too early, but this was certainly something that was tough and unique. And I think at that point in time we felt the support, and it
Hmm.
was quite apparent though after that 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 support system would begin to falter a little bit. And
Yeah.
as we had really difficult days, I would say those were the darkest days of our lives. And especially for Katie. Then after that point in time, it's, I would say experience, levels of depression and sadness. And I think more so she, more than I, had experienced anger,
Mhm.
whereas I don't know that I ever experienced that anger element, rather than just confusion and kind of that asking of why. And I remember those first weeks, months even, of just crying ourselves to sleep and asking why and she should be here, and truly dark days. And that was not helped by getting into the midst of winter,
Mhm.
starting the holiday seasons. And again, I would say a critical turning point, not for the better, was, those holidays of very difficult to get outreach and support from professional support
Yeah.
groups. Other family members and individuals of lost parents was really difficult to connect and engage, because holiday season, right?
Yeah.
Understandably. And after the holiday season, I think that's the moment where, we started to unfortunately lose some of that support group as well, where 3 or 4 months after this had transpired, and I feel that the expectation is, hey, there's probably some normalcy that should be back into Seth
Yeah.
and Katie's life. And that was absolutely not true at all.
Yeah. It's sad how people think that there's a time like, "Oh, it's been 2 months. You guys should be okay."
Yeah.
"Seth, you've made it 8 weeks. You're perfectly fine now." Like,
If only it
no.
could be so simple.
Yeah.
And I think in my mind there was a little bit of that I had. Like,
Oh, yeah.
after this had happened, I knew this was gonna be a really challenging and difficult road ahead of us. I think for whatever reason, if I read it or just kind of anecdotally thought about it, that these kind of events can really damage relationships.
Yes. Damaged a whole lot of different relationships
Yeah.
too.
And so that was always on the top of my mind. But I'm also, again, maybe too naive at that point to think not necessarily a certain period of time that will feel better,
Mhm.
but I was thinking, hey, 3 or 4 months, we can start planning again. We can
Yeah.
start to to begin having a family and go through this, and it's going to work out. Well, that was nothing further from the truth.
Mhm.
We had, as every lost mother would experience, and something I don't think you and I can ever appreciate or
No.
understand, Lee, is that, the post pregnancy, sadly, and I don't think I really thought about it at the time of Katie's going to experience and endure everything that normal
Yeah.
mother would go through.
Yeah.
And it's really tough.
It is a kick in the teeth. Yeah. Like, as you said, we as we as males will never understand that. But I just remember Winter, just her body betraying her. It knew that she gave birth, and the body needed to do what it needed to do to support a baby that was no longer there. And
Exactly
just cruel.
what
It's
had
just
happened, and it
cruel.
was cruel, because it's a constant reminder, those early days, of what should have been. And I just remember, again thinking, Katie, as she was engorged and milk from her breasts, I just remember her having to pump and sobbing at the same time, and just that overwhelming feeling of helplessness. Like,
Yeah.
again, that thinking of what can I and should I be doing, and not
Yeah.
knowing. And that I think, from a personal, is just, and I don't know how you felt through that, Lee, but
Yeah.
from my end was the realization of one of these things in my life that I just can't do anything about. And I don't even
Mhm.
know what I can or should do in this moment.
Yeah. It is complete helplessness on our parts. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how I had felt for, that's what we experienced, for the next many months. So it wasn't that, hey, in the next couple of months we can start to plan and we'll get back to some normalcy. It
Mhm.
was the emotions, the everyday emotions. It was small incremental steps for, I think, more so Katie than me, just to get back into an everyday routine. It
Mhm.
was celebrating just getting out of bed, getting a
Yeah.
shower, having dinner. Those were minor, small and many milestones that we had to start to recognize. And we finally had gotten some support through counseling at that point. And that's what she really encouraged us to do: of find those small wins every day. And
Yeah.
it's okay to stay in bed, and it's okay not to shower, and it's okay not to talk to one another. But you got to also find some of those small wins that are going to push us back into some normalcy. And
Hmm.
so that's what we did for a long time. We found some I would say kind of distractions, just with small things to do around the house, and what can we do to kind of motivate ourselves to get out of bed and get up and
Hmm.
moving. I started back at work. My employer was extremely gracious with the time away to take the time. Great outreach from employees, colleagues, coworkers, team members. Funds that were raised in honor of Everly, which was so special. Katie again had a tougher experience in my mind of, um, really challenging, of getting her time off. Right, it's really
Hmm.
tough to make the corporate benefit center understand that she delivered, but we don't have a birth
Yeah.
certificate to provide to you guys to
Yeah.
approve this time away. And so those first couple of weeks were extremely frustrating, sad, stressful, just going through that element too.
Oh.
As I think of, for me, as I got back to work, it proved to be a healthy distraction for me to focus and get back into a normal period of time. Katie had extended time away, which was necessary from a physical recovery,
Hmm.
but it was also, I think, prudent just to go slow.
Yeah.
Um, and then getting back to her work, I think, was proved to be very difficult. And I think it still does to this day. We are, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, we're 11 months, 27 days from this experience.
Yeah.
For 1 year anniversary will be up on November, for 1 year birthday will be November 1st of 2022. Will be 1 year. And it's been an incredibly difficult period of time where we thought 5 or 6 months ago, or my mind anyway, thinking, "Hey, we
Yeah.
can already be again on another second journey," and we're not there.
Yeah. I love saying this, and I don't know who or where I got it from, but the tapestry of life is sewn with so many strange threads. There's so many variants to that saying,
Yeah,
and as you thought and envisioned your life like, hey, I'll have a period of mourning will be done, and then we can progress. And it's never that simple.
no,
It's never that.
it hasn't been. And I started off our discussion today of, we were planners, right?
Hmm.
10 years of togetherness, 7 years married, checkboxed a lot of things. And what I've come to realize is you can plan the best you can, and it doesn't go according to
Yeah.
plan every time. And
Yeah.
that's kind of where we are today. Of, it's funny, I go back to let's create a plan, Katie, of, what do we need to do for ourselves to get there from a health perspective, from setting ourselves up again. And I have to really be careful,
Yeah.
because that plan doesn't always come out the way that you expect it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry.
What
Oh,
I
that.
mean, and that's Everly's story, Lee. It's incredible to go back and reflect, and I just have that vivid memory of almost every moment. And I think as we were chatting, some of those memories get suppressed, other things come to light. And I
Yeah.
think I'm happy for this, that I those memories have not been suppressed. I'd say what has
Hmm.
been somewhat suppressed, and I haven't talked as much about it, and I'd be happy to if you'd like, but some of those, again, those darker days after. I mean, I know I shared it's been tough and we expected to be in a different place now. Those are the days that I'm so happy that we're beyond.
Yeah.
I'm even having a hard time realizing and remembering, how did we get through those days, because
Hmm.
I can't even recall what the conversations might have been, what the thought process was. and just the feelings. And I'm kind of glad that those moments are suppressed because
Mhm.
those last 11 months have been those dark days. And it's incredible that I'm, here talking to you almost a year out, where we are.
The path that you took to get to here, it's a unique path. It's a very unique path. And the path that your wife Katie took to be to where she is now is a different path than yours. And people don't understand that the individuality of grief is so, as you're talking about the darkest days of your grief, sometimes those taught me, and my darkest days, they taught me so much about myself, so much about my relationship with my wife, with my daughter, with my son, and especially my relationship with Brandon, because I didn't know how I could continue on with parenting, with loving, but in that pain and in that darkness, we learn so much. Yeah, sometimes we don't get out of it the best, come out of it the cleanest, but we do come out of it. We do progress, and there will always be dark days. There will always be hard days. But if we continuously progress a little bit, it gets a little bit better.
Well said.
Mm.
Incredible.
Well, thanks. Seth, thank you so much. In parting, what would you like the world to know about you and your daughter, Everly?
Well, I can tell you I'm a proud father of Everly, even though she's not here. She's here in spirit every day. What I'd like for others to know is just, how this experience of losing a child through a stillbirth in our experience, how it can change one's life.
Mhm.
And it has significantly changed our lives from who we are, how we act. I don't know always for the better, but what I can tell you is the life of Everly that we've got to experience, those 9 months in the womb and the days that we were able to have physically with her, will forever change Katie and I. And I think every single thing that we do now has the knowing that Everly is with us and that we'll carry her with us forever. And I hope people know that we are just so proud of her. We're proud of each other as husband and wife. And we don't want anybody ever to forget that. And we don't want anybody to ever forget what lost parents have to endure and deal with. I think it's just special to have these kind of conversations so that we never forget those lost.
I agree. Thank you so much, Seth.
Thank you, Lee.